Welcome. This is a brief overview of an open world blockout I did. In this video, I will give you a look at what the level looks like and some of the design decisions that I made. As for the level itself, it was made for a game in the vein of Breath of the Wild and Immortals Phoenix Rising, meaning it focuses on player freedom but doesn't have free climbing or air gliding. Additionally, for this project I wanted to primarily concentrate on macro design, orientation and guidance, so there's no micro moment-to-moment gameplay in it. I also intentionally avoided using some design tricks I felt were a little too effective for how easy they were to design with, such as smoke plumes and the like. This isn't because you shouldn't use them, because they're great. I simply wanted to challenge myself more with this level. And since I want to keep this short, I won't cover everything I did, so if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to post them in the comments below. So here's the top-down view of the level. While it might seem fairly large, it's not that big in terms of an open world zone, since it's designed as the first zone the player starts in. In terms of scale, you can think of it as being roughly the size of the Great Plateau in Breath of the Wild. In terms of the desired player path, the player would start here, and preferably the player should travel along the beach roughly like this, across the bridge here, and head towards the village and windmill over here. Then they might access some of the content like here and such, and after that kind of like head through the crossroads and towards the forest. Maybe do something like so. Treehouse, roughly like this. So on to the sectors. This is what they roughly look like. I say roughly because there are no hard borders in the level. Each sector has a specific theme and feel to it, and as well as their own identities. So for instance, most man-made architecture are in the plains and village, with wood dominating the village and ruined stone structures on the plains. So for this blockout, I decided to make a bunch of basic meshes and materials to allow a better sense of what the final level could look like. But right now, I'm going to do a quick fly-through of the level to give you a better sense of what it looks like in 3D before I deep dive a bit more into the design. So here we start at the beach. You can see the path here towards the bridge, and the plains, and the plateau, the ruins, village, great tree in the center there, fly through the cave here to the crossroads. And up here we have the forest with the watchman's cabin, watchtower, temple and treehouse. I'll first do a brief run through up until the village area to give you an idea of my design approach for the level. The player starts on the beach where they can see surrounding the bridge, the fisherman's hut close by, the huge tree in the center and the village windmill on the right spinning for attention, that yellow X thingy there. Since there isn't too much interesting stuff nearby, apart from the hut, so that's where players are most likely to go first and investigate. After that, the big tree and the glowing blue runestone there in the center is their most likely next destination. This is partially because I also kind of like control and block players' vision with fencing to kind of like hide all this forest area on the left, and the cave here, stuff in the middle and other stuff on the right. As you can see here, the player can't actually see all this stuff from where they are right now. So we'll head towards the runestone now. And as they reach the runestone, the road, the more open space on the right, and the kind of like cart with the chest and such would kind of like to drive them more towards the right. And while there's nothing stopping them from going to the left towards the forest, it's perceived to generally be more enclosed and have less visual interest. Another example of this kind of like more limited visual interest is something I did over here by the crossroads. So for example, if the player comes through here, you can see that the kind of like vision is more funneled straight ahead towards the forest. So as the player heads down towards the right here, with the chest through kind of like a magnetic visual interest, They would also see the windmill once again here, spinning. That can kind of like draw them in, as well as some other kind of like closer breadcrumb elements, like the barrels and ruins here, the bridge. At this point, the player's vision is once again controlled to hide other potentially interesting things, while drawing attention to either the windmill or breadcrumb elements, like the shack in the center here or windmill. So to once again demonstrate how their vision is kind of like limited. They can't really see all this stuff above the peak here, the temple and such, from where they are right now. So the most visually interesting things would be kind of like the shack here and the windmill. So the player would kind of like approach from here towards the shack here. Can't really see anything of interest. And once they arrive at the village, can I enter play mode here? They have access to a solid hub and can easily view new content. So for example, they can see the temple and such from here. When they approach up the steps here, they can also see the hermit's place over there. And if they kind of like loop around from here at the top of the village, they have a good view of a lot of kind of like interesting content, like the hermits at the temple, the peak, the great tree in the center there, as well as far in the center there, we can see the kind of like watchtower and forest. Also, if they head towards the content, they would also see their next possible destinations, like the forest. So for example, if they headed through here and exited through here, they can see the watchtower in the distance there. Or if they went through the peak here and looped around, they could also see kind of like the forest here and the watchtower. Now, even if the player didn't go down this preferred path, I implemented some guiding elements and controlled vision to point them towards the village. So let's say they went up here through the peak, they would be looped around and see the village from here. Or if they kind of like came up here, they would first and foremost see the village here, but you could also get looped around through the ruins here and face the village. Even if they went off the beaten path towards the left here, towards the forest very early on, they would still first they would probably investigate the cabin here, but they would also see this tower here and probably head up towards it because they could get a good view of their surroundings. So from here it is faced towards the village and other interesting elements like the ruins, which they, even if they weren't head there immediately, they would at least mentally know where they are. So if they kind of like feel like they're not making any progress in the forest here or don't want to hang around here anymore, they can head towards the other area here, the plains with the village. To further help with orientation and to give different areas their own identity, I used themed elements. These elements are present in the respective areas and at entry/exit points to them. Some examples can be, for example, these wooden markers present throughout the beach area and at entry points to it, as we can see here. Another example is the plains, which has a lot of kind of like stone pillars, ruins, and such other kind of like architecture, man-made. Uh, and over by the forest, we can see by the woodsman's cabin a lot of chopped down trees, so we know we're close to the woodsman. If we have chopped down trees here, and we have some kind of like orange trees here. This is so the player can get a sense for where they are and where a path leads, just by looking around in their environment. To even further help with orientation, regardless of the area the player is in, there are also big kind of like noticeable landmarks to help them. They can identify them and figure out where they are in relation to said landmarks. The primary one is of course the great tree in the center, which can be seen from pretty much anywhere, even in the forest, like so. But even if it wouldn't be visible, like in say the forest, there are other landmarks like the tower and kind of like central orange tree here. In addition, I also considered the narrative world building of this zone, so it made sense. For instance, since the village is small, they can get by on mainly foraging, fishing and hunting, but they do have some grain production, as we can see here. It also makes sense for a settlement to be located next to a flowing body of water instead of still water, because it's cleaner. And I also tried to keep the kind of like geographical rules of how rivers are shaped and formed in mind as I designed the level, to make it kind of like more realistic and believable. Another example is how the woodsman chops down a lot of wood to help supply all the wood for the wooden structures throughout the level. As I mentioned earlier, I prioritized player freedom and flow to allow them to go wherever they wanted and not force them to make long detours, feel railroaded, and also not to drive the sense of that they want to just quick travel everywhere, because it's just annoying to just walk around. So let's pretend that the player's here and want to go here. Let's also pretend that this shortcut doesn't exist. This would basically mean that their path is blocked like so. So if they wanted to go towards the X, they would basically have to go like this or like this, which is kind of like a long detour. Instead of they could just, like now, they can just go through here instead. Obviously, however, I decided to make certain shortcuts and the like less obvious depending on the situation. Such as in the beginning, where I want the player to head towards the village. The path to the crossroads is a bit hidden from their expected approach, like so. You can see some vines and stuff there. But from the crossroads path, it's way more obvious. So since the video is getting a bit long, I'll end it with that. Let me know what you think, and if you have any questions, just fire away.